We've said it before and we will say it again, modders truly are the backbone of the video game community. These people dedicate hours and hours of their lives developing new content for the games we love, be it little quality of life improvements, fixes of problems that the devs either can't or won't resolve, or just silly add-ons that are meant to do no more than raise a smile. Most of the time they don't even get paid for the privilege. They truly are the heroes we don't deserve. Just occasionally though, modders will take what assets or technology a video game already has and use them to create a completely new experience, and these will, in many instances, end up becoming games in their own right. For this list, we're taking a look at some of the titles that began their lives as mods before going on to be developed into standalone games. I'm that one presenter you've modded to look like Thomas the Tank Engine Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are 10 video games that started out as mods. Number 10, Killing Floor. Here's a question for you. What's the best way to jazz up your first-person shooter in order to prevent it from becoming stale? Chuck a load of zombies into it, of course! Upon its release, Unreal Tournament 2004 quickly attracted the attention of the modding community. Developer Epic Games encouraged the practice, even going as far as to hold contests, which rewarded the creators of excellent mods. One of said brilliant creations was Killing Floor, a total conversion that pits players against waves of flesh-eating undead. Shortly after the mod's release, lead developer Alex Quick was approached by Tripwire Interactive, who were interested in porting the mod to Red Orchestra Ostfront 41-45, a game which also started life as an Unreal Tournament mod. Nothing came of it though, so for a few years, Killing Floor continued on as a mod. Quick later approached Tripwire regarding the idea for a port, but it ended up being developed into a standalone game instead. In just 3 months, a team of 10 developers created Killing Floor, and it was finally unleashed on the public in May 2009. Most agreed that, despite Killing Floor's flaws, namely the graphics and voice acting, they couldn't help but love it, and it even managed to net a handful of awards for its efforts. Number 9, Dear Esther. We now come to the first of several games on this list that began life as a mod for Half-Life or its sequel. Developed by The Chinese Room, the studio now famous for titles such as Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, Dear Esther was first released in 2008 as a mod for Half-Life 2. In terms of gameplay, the only thing that players are required to do is explore an uninhabited Hebridean island, all while listening to a man who reads a series of letters written to his deceased wife. In 2009, artist Robert Briscoe began redeveloping Dear Esther, working in parallel with The Chinese Room. He completely redesigned the island in order to help eliminate player confusion and also to make it more visually appealing. The remake had been funded by the University of Portsmouth. However, the financial backing was withdrawn partway through development. Luckily, the studio was able to secure the support of the Indie Fund, and the standalone game was released in 2012. Within just 6 hours of its release on Steam, Dear Esther had amassed over 16,000 downloads, and the Chinese Room were able to pay back the Indie Fund's investment in full. You should have had more faith, University of Portsmouth. Number 8, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. To say that PUBG's been on a bit of a wild journey to get where it is today is a bit of an understatement, as the jump from mod to standalone game wasn't quite as straightforward as it was for some of the other titles on this list. Whilst living in Brazil in 2013, Brendan Green, aka PlayerUnknown, began playing the DayZ mod for Arma 2. Don't worry, we'll get to that in just a minute. Inspired by the Japanese film Battle Royale, Green decided to have a go at modding the game himself, creating DayZ Battle Royale. After the mod achieved success, Green was recruited by Sony Online Entertainment, who drafted him in to create a Battle Royale mode for H1Z1 that recreated a number of elements of DayZ Battle Royale. Upon its release, it caught the eye of South Korean company Krafton, who got in touch with Green about the possibility of creating a game based on his previous work. And so, after years of creating various iterations of Battle Royale titles, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds was born. And it was an immediate smash hit, earning a plethora of awards and even setting a Steam record for most concurrent players. Number 7, Team Fortress Classic. These days, the words Team and Fortress, specifically in that order, are most closely associated with Valve, developer, publisher, and god of Steam. Initially, however, Team Fortress Classic began its days as a mod for ID Software's first-person shooter, Quake. Developed by TF Software, the Team Fortress mod pits two teams against each other in a variety of different scenarios, including Capture the Flag and VIP Player Escort. Following the mod's release, the devs were approached by Valve, you'll start to see this become a bit of a pattern, who hired them to create a port of Team Fortress 2 as a mod for Half-Life. They had been working on Team Fortress 2 as a standalone follow-up to their mod. Sadly, the integration with Valve, plus a number of other factors, meant that, even though they had aimed to release TF2 at the turn of the millennium, it didn't actually see the light of day until 2007. Despite everything that was going on in the background, the TF Half-Life mod released in April 1999, and though Team Fortress version 1.5 was bundled in with one of Half-Life's updates, the game wasn't released on its own until 2003, when it finally appeared on Steam as Team Fortress Classic. It was a bumpy ride, guys, but at least we got there in the end. Number 6, DayZ. We've already mentioned in our PUBG entry that DayZ was a mod for Arma 2, before being developed into a game in its own right, and I bet you're dying to know how that came about. The mod was the brainchild of New Zealand game designer Dean Hall, who had the idea for DayZ whilst undertaking jungle training with the Singapore Armed Forces. He wanted to create a game that truly immersed players in the survival experience, regardless of whether or not it felt balanced or fair. Following its launch, the DayZ mod acquired a huge player base, registering more than 1 million users in its first 3 months. It was so good that it reinvigorated the world's interest in Arma 2, sending it back into the Steam top seller charts 3 years after its release. In August 2012, Hall announced that DayZ was being developed as a standalone game, and that the team were aiming for initial release in November of the same year. Rather than just tarting up the mod, however, the devs redeveloped the engine, and so an alpha didn't actually reach users until December 2013, and didn't leave early access for another 5 years. Still, it was worth the wait, right? Number 5, The Forgotten City. If you've ever played Skyrim before, you'll know just how blooming big it is. Just completing the main story and all the side quests will take the average player well over 100 hours, and that's before we even look at all the modded content that's on offer. Following Skyrim's release in 2011, Australian modder Nick Pierce got to work on The Forgotten City. He spent over 1,700 hours of his own time creating the mod, which gave players a whole new area of Skyrim to explore, along with an intriguing murder mystery questline that sees the player transported back in time. The Forgotten City was a hit and even won a National Screenwriting Award, which is basically unheard of for a video game mod. Multiple news outlets quickly caught wind of its success and encouraged Pierce to develop it into a full game. But it wasn't until he sat down for a beer with League of Geeks co-founders Trent Cusses and Blake Mizzy that he took the idea seriously. Pierce quit his job in 2016 and hired several developers in order to found Modern Storyteller. Over the course of 4 years, the mod was completely overhauled, and in 2021, The Forgotten City was finally launched as a standalone game, garnering critical acclaim in the process. Number 4, Garry's Mod. I know it will come as a surprise to some of you, but the 2006 sandbox title Garry's Mod actually started its life out as a mod. Feel free to take a moment to let that one sink in. I'm sure the news is somewhat of a shock to you. Created by programmer Gary Newman, Garry's Mod is a bit of a strange game in that it doesn't give players any set objectives, instead plonking them into a world in which they can freely manipulate objects and create their own fun. Newman began creating Garry's Mod as a side project whilst developing his first game, Face Wound, but he soon found that his work on the former was far more enjoyable. His skills weren't advanced enough to create a standalone game though, so he pressed on with Garry's Mod as a mod for Half-Life 2. It wasn't long before Valve were in touch, seeking to launch the game in its own right through Steam. Newman was reluctant at first, but eventually struck a deal with the publisher, and Garry's Mod was finally released in 2006. These days, the game remains hugely popular because it allows creators to build their own mods and game modes. Fans will also be pleased to know that, at the time of writing, Newman is working on a spiritual successor to Garry's Mod. Number 3, The Stanley Parable. It's really not unfair to say that The Stanley Parable was a bit of an odd game. It was originally developed as a mod for Half-Life 2 by a chap called Davey Redden, who began working on it in response to his feelings surrounding typical narratives in video games. Specifically, he was frustrated with the fact that many AAA titles didn't give the player the opportunity to make choices for themselves. The game itself tells the story of Stanley, an employee in an office building who is tasked with monitoring incoming data on his computer and pushing appropriate appropriate buttons. When the screen goes blank one day, he wanders into the building, only to find that it's been abandoned. From there, the story branches, and the ending the player receives will depend on what choices they make throughout the game, and whether or not they follow the directions of the narrator or not. Following the release of the mod in 2011, Redden was contacted by British game designer William Pugh, and the pair spent 2 years developing a standalone version of the Stanley Parable. It was ultimately okayed for release on Steam by Valve, and was finally launched in October 2013, delighting players with its themes of existentialism and bizarre sense of humour. Number 2. Dota 2. You might be starting to think that Valve has a bit of a monopoly on mods that go on to become full games, considering that they seem to be one degree of separation from most titles on this list. But to that I say, you're probably not entirely wrong. The OG Defense of the Ancients, aka Dota, was a MOBA mod for Blizzard's Warcraft 3. The original map was created by single modder Kyle Eulogizing Sommer, but after he stopped updating the mod and made the code open source, other modders were inspired to create a number of spin-offs. The most popular of these was Dota All-Stars, which was created by Mayan and Ragnar, and compiled all of the various mods' most popular heroes into a single map. The maintenance reins passed into different hands a couple of times and ultimately ended up with an anonymous developer known only as IceFrog. Meanwhile, the good folks down at Valve had been playing Dota All-Stars and got the bright idea to create a modernised version of the game. In 2009, they sought out IceFrog, who signed to be Dota 2's lead designer, and the standalone title launched in 2013. There was also a whole load of legal drama regarding who owned the rights to Dota, but honestly, if we get into that, we'll be here all day. And number 1, Counter-Strike. You can all relax now. We promise this is the last entry that has anything to do with either Half-Life or Valve. Yes, I know it's the final entry, but I'm trying to keep the viewers calm. Whilst exploring options for a new project during his last semester at university, designer Min Lee had the idea to create a counter-terrorist game using Valve's Gold SRC engine. Counter-Strike's first beta was released in 1999 to a fairly tepid response, but Lee, along with co-creator Jess Cliff, continued to refine the gameplay by utilising player feedback, and interest in the mod grew massively. Around the time that the 5th beta was made available, the duo was approached by Valve, who wanted to properly release the game, and in late 2000, the publisher took Counter-Strike to the masses. Today, the Counter-Strike series is considered to be one of the most influential first-person shooters in gaming history, has a huge competitive community, and has sold more than 25 million units worldwide. Not bad for a final year project, wouldn't you say?